Hey guys, I'm Noel. I'm an adventure, conservation, and wildlife photographer, and today we're talking about the Nikon Z7 Mirrorless Camera. So this camera has been with me for the better part of a year, and we're gonna go over it here in my show called Hammerhead Gearhead. Just a few notes before we start. This episode is a year in review, meaning it's a long-term review. So if you are that type of person who holds out on a camera or any product until it's tested, then this video is perfect for you. The Z7 came out in August of 2018, but it only made it to my hands in Feb of last year. So that's a good year before I'm making this video. On that note, full disclosure, I am a Nikon ambassador, specifically a Nikon Z Trailblazer representing the Z7. That said, Nikon is not paying me for this video. You see, in as much as I love and adore the Nikon Z7, I am aware of certain things that I wish Nikon would address either with another firmware or with the next generation of cameras. No camera is perfect, so my objective for this video is to not only show you the strengths and some of the weaknesses of the camera, but to show you how to make it work best for you. This review will also be in narrative form, so you kind of get an idea of where I brought the Z7. So if you're ready to go through time with me, let's begin. Back in January 2019, I was shooting with a beast of a camera, which was the Nikon D850. I was bringing it underwater regularly, and I also brought it to the subarctic to take photos of polar bears. And as a backup camera, I had the Nikon D500. So imagine the D850 and D500, it was such a tough tandem to beat. But it also brought along its own set of problems. This time, it had to do with weight. I was traveling with more than 60 kilograms of gear at a time with outdoor gear, dive gear, and camera gear, and it was creating logistical issues, so I had to trim down. It's worth noting that in 2017, I did shift to a mirrorless system. I had a Sony a7R II, but I had some problems with it, such as a short battery life, there was no native fisheye lens, there was no fast macro lens, and I wasn't a fan of the color science, so I eventually went back to a DSLR. I bought the Nikon D850, but deep down inside, I was wishing that Nikon would come out with a new mirrorless line. Imagine my excitement when Nikon finally released the Nikon Z series in late 2018. Not only was this wish coming true for me, there are a lot of things that I really liked. First is the FTZ adapter. It allowed me to use lenses that I could not live without, such as the Nikon 8-15 fisheye, the 60mm macro, the 105 macro. This basically meant that I wasn't sacrificing in terms of lens lineup. Also, look at the short distance between the mount and the sensor. This basically means that you can adapt any lens you want. Another is the NL15B battery, which allowed you to charge the Nikon Z7 via USB. It also meant that I can use the NL15A for my D850 and also the NL15 for my D500 across all three cameras. It was just so convenient. Last is port size. So if you're gonna buy an underwater housing for an interchangeable lens camera like a mirrorless, you first have to buy the housing itself for the body. Then, depending on the type of lens that you will use, you will either have to buy a fisheye port, let's say for a wide-angle lens or a fisheye lens, or a macro port for a macro lens. The thing is, the port sizes differ depending on the camera type. So a DSLR would probably have an N120 or 120mm port. A mirrorless usually has a 100mm port. Micro Four Thirds would probably have an 85. So when I had to switch from a Nikon D800 to a Sony a7R II, I not only had to sell the body, but also all my N120 ports, and then purchase N100 or 100mm ports for my new mirrorless system. It was such a big hassle. Now with the Nikon Z7, Nauticam retained the N120 port for its housing, meaning I could use the same ports that I use for the Nikon D850, Nikon D500, and the Nikon Z7. So that was so convenient because I could set up a very modular kit depending on what I was using. So after nabbing an underwater housing for the Nikon Z7, I immediately took it down for a spin. Now I had very high standards for image quality because of the D850, and I wasn't expecting to be blown away, but safe to say, I was. Underwater images need a lot of color correction in post, but photos from the Z7 were already great straight from the camera. Color registry was that good. Color accuracy is also very important in realistically portraying underwater scenes. Images were also really sharp. and the amount of detail I was able to capture was outstanding. The colors and overall image quality were nothing short of what I would have gotten with the D850, and the dynamic range was incredibly impressive. Dynamic range is of particular importance for me underwater, where you can have the deepest of shadows and the brightest of highlights in one photo. Just check out this photo that I took, where you have a really bright sunball and dark crevices in one shot. I was still able to pull out detail from both ends in Lightroom. It's that loaded. Having great dynamic range gives you peace of mind when you know you want to bring out as much detail in every single shot. In March 2019, I went on assignment with Greenpeace and once again boarded their flagship, the Rainbow Warrior 3. It was a 3-week ship tour where we campaigned for the reduction of single-use plastic pollution. So for this assignment, I brought the D850 for underwater and the Nikon Z7 for topside photography, simply because the Z7 was just much lighter. The highlight of the tour was an early morning non-violent direct action that involved Greenpeace intercepting a barge carrying plastic in Manila Bay and posting a banner that called for the reduction of single-use plastic. The Z7 performed admirably during the shoot, with the weather sealing holding up against the spray of contaminated, dirty seawater. It has the same weather sealing, same gaskets as the D850, and that in itself was impressive. The top display is also invaluable when I had to change settings while the camera was stuck under my shirt, protecting it from the bigger splashes. This is where the ergonomics came into play. The grip allowed for a firm grasp of the camera as their boat was zigzagging across the waves. So I had one hand on the Z7 and another on the boat. The lighter weight and the well-balanced quality of the camera allowed me to shoot with just one hand. And also, because of the smaller form factor, I was able to extend my endurance for the whole 5-hour shoot, and that in itself was a big deal for me. Now, the true proving ground for the Z7 for me was in Tubataha Reef's Natural Park. Every year, I head to the park for 5 days of glorious diving. Situated in the middle of the Cebu Sea, the gem of Philippine dive destinations was a haven for sharks, school of fish, and other fast-moving subjects. This was a real test, as I read that time that the autofocus of the Z7 was not at par with the D850, never mind the D500. As it turns out, this wasn't a problem for me, especially as I only shoot in single drive mode and always relied on AFS. It was a choice not only because I was adapting to the camera, but also because of habit. There were indeed times though that I wished that the autofocus was faster, but even then I was coming home with a lot of keepers. I never felt that I was missing shots simply because I've always trained myself to wait for the peak of the moment and always prepare for that shot. I even came home with a really nice portrait of the skittish black-tip reef shark, which I haven't been able to capture for the last few years. The battery life is also worth mentioning. With my old mirrorless, I was changing batteries every after dive, which meant I was really risking a flood underwater. The Z7, while being a mirrorless camera, lasted a day. This was impressive considering I take probably 1,000 photos every single dive day. So sometime in June, I went from sea to summit to the Cordillera mountain range with fellow Nikon ambassadors. So for this one, we shot landscapes. Now this is where I fully appreciated the Nikon Z7 EVF, which I consider to be the best in its class. We shot landscapes on this trip, but since we were shooting at times where light pollution could have been an issue, I relied heavily on my EVF so as not disturbed by other photographers. The EVF is just clear and stunning. It amplifies low light and even allowed me to zoom. As a result, I never had to take my eye away from it. Before I became a photographer, I was actually a director for 8 years, and then I was a video editor for 15 years before that. The ironic thing is, I never thought that I'd be going back to video until December of last year when I decided to make this channel. I took the Z7 to Thailand to film the Wonder Fruit Festival and shoot the first episode of my mini documentary series. The Z7 is an impressive specimen. The video quality, especially in 4K, is superb. I also like how by switching modes, the camera remembers your settings from video. Coupled with an Atomos Ninja 5 and a paid upgrade, you could also record ProRes RAW externally. But its strength is also its weakness, as you can only do so with the Ninja 5 and that upgrade. The internal recording quality is fine, but it couldn't really take heavy grading. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the lenses. This is the 24-70 f4. Now, don't be fooled by its kit lens designation and its max aperture of f4. It's an impressive lens, it's sharp across the board, and it's very portable. Such a stellar lineup. In fact, I also want the 14-30 f4 for underwater videography and for landscapes. So that brings us to today. It's been a great year shooting with the Nikon Z7, so much so that I feel like it's an extension of my arm. But what are the things that I would like to be solved or addressed in the Nikon Z7 or in the Z series as a whole? Well, off the bat, I wish there was a way to record 4K 60 internally and to a certain extent, record N-Log internally as well. This would be a big help for those who would want to keep a smaller rig, a smaller system when they're running and gunning or when they're a one-man crew. Let's also address the elephant in the room. Improved autofocus, better IAF, better face detection is something that will be good to have in the next generation of Z cameras. I mean, this hasn't affected me personally, but I know a lot of photographers who are asking for it. Also, an articulating LCD screen will be good to have. The Z50 already has this flip down LCD, but maybe for the next Z7 it would be good if it kind of flips to the side as well, so it would be easier to vlog in some cases. I would also love to see a native fisheye lens. I know that the market may be small, but after seeing the roadmap, seeing the 105mm macro, the 60mm macro, I'm having high hopes and my fingers are crossed that they would release this for us underwater photographers. I wasn't too bothered by the single slot XQD card. XQDs are really fast and really robust. I've never had a card failure, but if this is what the customers want, then maybe Nikon should listen. Lastly, I'm really hoping that Nikon will come out with an even higher end D500 type Z camera for sports and wildlife that has an autofocus system that will blow the competition out of the water. Now, if you made it this far, then it would seem that you're committed to getting a Z6 or a Z7 camera. Let me take it one step further and share the accessories that I got for my unit. For added protection, I got a screen protector for my LCD and for my top window. Whenever this camera is on my person, it gets thrown around just a bit depending on the assignments that I'm in. So having that extra level protection gives me so much peace of mind. Now, for shooting video, I purchased the 8-SYN cage, the best looking cage for the Z6 or Z7, and also the Atomos Ninja 5. If you want to see more of my work, head on over to my Instagram. There you will see adventure, conservation, and wildlife photos, mostly taken with the Z7. If you want to see video, check out this Wonderfruit travel video that I shot with the Z7 and the Weeble S gimbal. For next week, I will be uploading content on how to better shoot video, whether it's with a DSLR, a mirrorless, or even a phone camera. So if you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe and also hit that bell so you get notified for future content. It goes without saying that this is the very first review that I've ever done. So if you have comments, if you have suggestions, if you liked it, if you didn't, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you and I would like to take these suggestions and discuss the Z7 further in detail. Cheers guys, I'll see you next week.